know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Siege, you can tell me if the game is already passed or not, but are you planning at all on visiting Mullett Arena if the Leafs play there or for any other reason this year at all?
Well, I'd like to see it. You know, why? I've been to every arena that has opened or been open during my time as a reporter, so I would like to go there at some point. And there's got to be some curiosity factor there. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into some more of the nitty gritty of where it's at to start, where it's going, and what the Coyotes' future looks like. But, you know, I'd like to go to a college atmosphere for an NHL game, see a rink that I think has 13 seats, like 13 rows rather, like no upper bowl, no middle bowl. Yeah, I'd like to get there and see it.
Someone is going to make a joke about the fact that arena has 13 seats, but that's life for the Arizona Coyotes. They play in a venue that is about 5K. It's a college arena on the grounds of the Arizona State University, and their visitor facilities are just an open room with curtains. I mean, they say it's supposed to make more money. It's supposed to be this crazy atmosphere, but as a person for watching from a distance, I'm just a little bewildered about all of this. To be honest, I don't know if I'm going to visit the arena myself, but like, at least just looking at it, I'm like, what's going on? That's how I feel.
Well, I'm guessing you're someone who was never at their previous arena, the Gila River Arena, it was called most recently. And, you know, I covered a bunch of games there over the years. And I have to say, part of how you view this has to be through the scope of what that was. And that was facility-wise, there was no problems with that building. It looked and felt like an NHL arena in every way when you walked around it, but I was never there when there was much of a crowd. You know, I was even there I was there, for example, the first night that Austin Matthews played in Arizona, you know, a local boy who had, created some buzz around the league, and it still didn't have some crazy atmosphere. And so, you know, that was not a profitable situation for the Coyotes, for the players who share 50-50 in revenues either. And so I think part of the reason that we get to this solution being acceptable, at least on some level, is that what they had really was not working at all. And they had no other options. You know, one of the things they considered was actually putting a rink in Chase Field where the Arizona Diamondbacks play. That was like among the possible considerations prior to getting to Mullett Arena, was playing an entire year in a baseball stadium. And so you have to frame it in the right way. Like what they were choosing between, none of those, there was no perfect other option out there. You know, as for the visiting dressing room, it's still a couple, like that video shot a couple days before the game. I want to see the final version. And the other part is, yeah, there's a lot of crappy visiting dressing rooms around the league, quite frankly. I mean, obviously teams put a lot of resources and space into having their home dressing rooms be nice, but it's not like the visiting rooms around the league are all palaces. So, you know, I'm not defending the setup, but I do think some context, like if you only see that video on Twitter and you're going to react to it, like you have to remember where we're coming from here. And, you know, I'm actually so Friday night against the Jets, right? That's the first game there. I mean, I know a bunch of national reporters are flying down there. Everyone's going to sort of cover that for one day, you know, like what is this like and how does it feel? And I'm sure some of my esteemed colleagues will write, oh, it was even better than we thought. You know, it was fun. I'm curious where we're at a couple of years down the road, right? I mean, like it's a bit of a novelty curiosity at this point, but you know, this is meant to be a semi-long-term solution while the Coyotes try to get their own rink built in Tempe. And you know, I'm wondering, it's not just where this starts. It's like, how does it age? You know, how does this wear on the Coyotes, or is it something they can make comfortable enough? You know, those are questions we don't have an answer to yet.
Yeah, this is a place they'll be playing in through 2025, correct?
Yeah, and maybe longer, right? I mean, let's say, I know that there's a couple council meetings in November, you know, where, you know, the Coyotes are hoping that their arena project, their permanent arena project moves forward. You know, it takes a long time from getting approvals to, you know, first shovel in the ground to actually opening an arena. You know, we've seen even some recent examples, right? The Islanders played all those games on the road last year because their new building wasn't ready to start the season. The Rangers had to play a bunch on the road when they were renovating MSG. Like it's hard. Even Seattle, if I recall correctly, didn't have Climate Pledge Arena open right when the season started because these things tend to take a little longer than even you plan. And so 2025 is the optimistic view. I think reasonably it could be another year beyond that. And that's assuming the Coyotes get the approvals they need at all. I don't know where they turn next. It feels, someone covering the league as long as I have, Julian, like it feels like we've been talking about what does the Coyotes do for like 15 years? Because I think we pretty much have. If you go back to when they were in bankruptcy and Jim Balsillie tried to buy them out of bankruptcy, through the courts and move them unilaterally to Hamilton without league approval. I believe that was 2007, 2008, somewhere there. So
we were still using Blackberries back then.
We were. I actually, this is a true story. So I was working for the Canadian Press at the time, and I covered a lot of those court hearings. So I was flying into Phoenix and doing that. And I believe I had a Blackberry, and that was my first viral tweet. Because I started to tweet a little bit from the courtroom, and obviously anyone who was a hockey fan who was interested at the time, it wasn't like every reporter that was there was tweeting because it was sort of a more new technology. So I guess that must have been a little later, maybe 2009 when that was happening. But anyway, I remember it was the first time I was getting notifications when every follower joined, and like my inbox went like, because I got like 100 followers from one tweet from the Coyotes court case. Because again, it was an immediacy that fans at that time couldn't have. It wasn't that I broke some crazy story or, I was really just doing what we now everybody does everywhere that covers news. But anyway, that's a complete aside. But this is why
great story, by the way.
Right, but it's a complete aside. But the point is, it's been so long that we've been pondering the future of this franchise and what's going to save it that it comes to feel a bit exhausting. Maybe that's why there isn't more outrage too, quite honestly, that they're playing in this arena. Like I know there's a fair bit of snark, but I just think that, the saga of this franchise, you could fit it in several books. I don't know who would want to read them, but there's been so many twists and turns and ownership situations and, a lot of well-meaning people trying to get it off the ground, frankly. Like that's the other thing is I know people that work in the organization, like I don't take any pleasure in kicking them. Like it would be great because people have invested time and energy into making it work. It'd be great if it worked out. This feels like a Hail Mary though, right now. I suppose if they catch the college vibe and they get the approval and they start building the new rink, it'll probably be fine. But if one of those things doesn't happen, it's a little fraught with peril.
Yep, that's actually a really good way of putting it. I just want to see if it'll actually make money. It just seems as if like people are so into it and people are buying tickets, at least just more hearsay than anything. I'm genuinely curious about how that will hold up and also how the players genuinely feel about it. And I guess we'll know about it through those stories that'll be written. But I really would love to know how Clayton Keller and whoever they end up picking in the NHL entry draft next summer feel about playing in an arena like Mullett. That's what I'm looking at.
Right. And as a visiting player, like it might not be so bad for one-off games here and there, right? It's like you get to stay at a different part. If you haven't been to the greater Phoenix area, it's a huge, expansive area. Glendale, their former home, was a long, long way from the airport, a long way from Scottsdale, where you can find nice restaurants and nightlife. So this will allow them to stay somewhere new. Maybe the college vibe, especially for those that played in college, might be fun for a game. Like I think you can enjoy it, but you do wonder about the Coyotes themselves, like how that will come to feel, after 10 games, after 50 games, after potentially 100 games, if they spend 4 years there and the guys on the team the whole time, that's a tough look. And then, let's imagine Connor Bedard ends up, playing for the Coyotes, like, the next maybe generational star in the league. Like it's not a perfect situation. They don't pretend it is, to be fair. It's just, this is the last attempt, I would think, to try to make it work in Arizona in terms of, it's one thing to start in this arena and we can get really into that. But the other part is they have to actually move forward with their own arena project, or I don't think this can last too long.
Exactly. Since this is the opener, I don't think we can go too long, or else we're going to keep David Bastel waiting from Sports Interaction. But I like today's episode. I like all of our episodes. After Sports Interaction, we're going to discuss some of the more interesting storylines that have taken place to this point in the year, and we'll also get to stick taps. But considering how this Arizona arena situation is going, this is going to be one of those topics we keep going back to every so often. So this is not the last you've heard us discuss the Arizona Coyotes. But in the meantime,
I got to add one thing though. There's one point.
Yeah,
because I get that most of our listeners out there probably aren't following the Coyote schedule. So they started with 6 games on the road. They have this little 4-game homestand that starts Friday against the Jets. Then they're on the road for 14 more games while they finish up the dressing room facilities and make those a lot nicer than what you've seen bounce around your Twitter feed. So that's an insane start to the season.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, the roster is one thing that they have there, but just having that kind of schedule, like that is so hard on any team. We could take the best team in the league and give them that schedule, and I don't think you're coming through with a great record. So this is going to be a really difficult year for the Coyotes. I actually make no fun of that. Can you imagine a 14-game road trip? A lot of these guys are fathers or have partners or whatever. That's crazy. So they're dealing with a lot more than just playing in a really small arena this season at home.
Tell you what, if you're a team like Arizona trying to, get a high draft pick in next summer's draft, you find the silver linings in a 14-game road trip, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's at the ownership and management level, though. At the player level,
exactly.
A lot of those guys know they're not going to be there when the team is good down the road at some point. When all those draft picks are ready to take their jobs, they're going to be somewhere else. So I'm just saying, pour one out or have a little bit of empathy for some of the players on the Coyotes, because I think this will be as challenging a year as a lot of them will ever face. And I'm saying that having realized some of them have just come through playing in a bubble and in the pandemic and playing in front of no fans and all that stuff. This might even be harder than that.
Man, if the Arizona Coyotes end up being really good, that's a really good story to do. Say if Clayton Keller hangs around for all of this, that's a guy you talk to, because that's a guy who will have endured playing in a bubble, having a serious injury to end a season, playing in a 5,000 seat arena, having all these different tanking measures to get all these top draft picks. If the Arizona Coyotes end up being good at the end of this, Clayton Keller is the person I want to talk to.
You're assuming he stays there. That's
true. If he stays there,
that's not a knowledge base. I'm not reporting anything, but I'm just saying they're a few years away from being a few years away. So, he's going to have some scars already, and it's still a little while before we're talking about this team being on the rise.
All right, let's bring on David Bastel from Sports Interaction. 19 and over if you're playing on Sports Interaction. We ask that you play responsibly. There will be a link to responsible gaming strategies in the description of the show. It is time for You Can Bet That.
Sports Interaction, Canada's Sportsbook, presents You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Ontario only.
Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Please remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Let's take a look at some lines from some games tonight. The Leafs play the San Jose Sharks. The Leafs, I believe, are favored in this game at 1.44. San Jose at 2.88. What's the word, DB?
Yeah, no surprise. The Leafs are the much better team. Every kind of scope of it against a weaker Sharks team. So you kind of look at it coming off a loss against Vegas. We're expecting a backup goaltender in net for both teams. If we're looking at James Reimer as being the starter in San Jose, I know that's debatable, but CJ, this Sharks team really, I'm not going to say they're lottery enforced, but they are probably competing close to a lottery position at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's fair given how they started. Although it's funny, for all the years I had covering the Leafs sort of on a day-to-day basis, I remember going to a lot of games in San Jose, and those were tough nights. The Leafs didn't win a lot of games there over the years, but times are shifting, and the Sharks are in a season where they're going to lose, I think, a lot more than they win.
CJ, when's the last time you spoke to Sharky?
The last time I was there, I was actually right during the COVID pause. The Leafs had a California road trip in March 2020. And I remember I got a picture with Sharky. He's my buddy. So good to see him.
I could imagine. He was about to eat your head off in that photo. Jeez. Anyway.
He's my favorite mascot. I'll be honest.
Okay. UP would be my personal favorite. DB, what's yours before we get to Vancouver, Seattle?
Benny and the Jets, of course.
Of course.
Going old school. Jets 1.0.
Okay, so Vancouver and Seattle.
Yep.
A lot of people are going to be watching that game to see if the Vancouver Canucks will continue their road to futility as it has started for them. The Kraken are favored. I can't think of too many times in their history because of the way the team is composed where the Kraken are favored to win a hockey game, but they are against the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, and you said it right there because that's exactly what I was going to say. You don't see this too many times, but 3-3-2 to start off the year are the Kraken, CJ, playing very well, but when are the Canucks going to kind of get off the, I'm shocked. Like I did not think the Canucks were going to be a top contender in the Pacific. That would really surprise me there, but really 0-5-2 to start the year.
Well, and I think they're facing Martin Jones in the game too. So it's a Kraken backup because of an injury to Philip Grubauer. It's sometimes things are hard to explain, right? I mean, Vancouver's had injuries. They had a road trip. Obviously, I think the negative cycle of blowing the leads early in the year kind of affects the confidence. It's a little bit of everything. And man, if I can think of a team that needs a win badly, there's no one more than the Canucks, and we're only 2 and a bit weeks into the season.
Absolutely. If they don't win, we might have to talk about them a little bit more on Monday's show. David, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN.
Thanks, guys.
You can read CJ's latest on northstarbets.ca, the 10 best stories and surprises in the National Hockey League so far. Let's go through them on our podcast. Siege.
Thank you. And look, the impetus for even doing this exercise, I have to say, is that I was thinking to myself, we're 2 weeks into the season and we're all like the version of ambulance chasers in the sports media world, right? Like it's all just like, this is to go into hell in Vancouver and Minnesota. I saw Mike Russo had a good piece with Bill Guerin this week, just talking about like how they got to get going. I've seen it called a crisis on Long Island. We got into the whole Sheldon Keefe and, everything going on in the Leafs. It just feels like, let's be real. Some of that outrage or whatever will be legitimate, but we're not going to know for a month, like truly, like a team like the Leafs, for example, or even Minnesota, like a month from now, we might laugh that we ever were worried about a couple losses in the first 2 weeks of the season. So I was like, what are we missing? And I do think sometimes by focusing on all the calamity or concern that some good stories get missed too. So that was just as a frame of reference, how I got to like what, okay, really, let's look deeper here and what are the good stories we're missing? And I think there's a lot, and there's certainly a lot more than the 10 I contemplated, but these are just what I came up with.
So for everyone in the comments, you are not going to find Vancouver, Minnesota, the Islanders, and the Leafs misery in the top 10, but you will find some really good stories like Sidney Crosby still being really, 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 really good.
Exactly. And look, I get that might be boring for some because, depending on your age, just Sidney Crosby's been really, really, really good. Maybe your whole life, or even if you're 30 for more than half your life, because this is his 18th NHL season. I think what's interesting here for me, Julian, he's the 31st oldest skater in the league. So really? He is. That doesn't include goaltenders, and there's a few goaltenders older than him. But, he's approximately the 40th oldest player in the league. In a league of 800 people, you start doing the math. Like he's trending towards extinction, for lack of a better term. And it's not to say one of a few good years, but the fact that he's right there back at the top of the scoring race early on, you look at, the amount of shots he's generating, the points per 60, like everything is still in such a strong position for him. And he had a great year last year. I mean, I think it's a great story that Sidney Crosby has found a way. Again, he's a little older, I think, than most people that follow the game would think. And he's doing something at an age you wouldn't expect him to do if you were just looking at numbers and just considering aging curves and all those things. And so, to me, it's a great story that there's no sign of drop off here. And, if he stays healthy this year, and people probably aren't paying attention to this, he'll probably climb to 15th on the NHL's all-time points list. And if he has another healthy year next year, he's top 10 is not that far off for him. And so we are truly in the golden years of his career. And so much like we've talked maybe about Alex Ovechkin's goal scoring at times and how he does that at an age you wouldn't expect, I think the fact that Crosby's so productive, so effective, and look, the Penguins are off to a good start too, and that's not a coincidence.
By the way, Sidney Crosby's next assist will be the 900th of his career.
And he's over 500 goals. So
correct.
You're getting to, I mean, we already know he's a special player, but now it's sort of like how high will he climb, right? How special will he be? That's kind of the question. And how long will he go? You know, I don't have that answer, but I think it's one of those nice stories that's probably flown under the radar nationally. I saw that he got some nice shout outs when he was 3-year town in Calgary there last week. Nazem Kadri had some kind words about him, but probably a little bit of, we focus on the new toys and forget that some of the old boys are still pretty good too.
Still looking really great at 35 years old. Also 80 points away from 1,500 career points in his career. Sidney Crosby, I mean, he's been a special player as long as I've been following the league. And it's not, I don't want to say it's a surprise. It's not a surprise that he's still playing well at his age, but like you bring up a really good point. We should really kind of just savor in the fact that he's still good. We don't know how long he has. And the fact that he's still able to play at a high level, like, that's special. Like, to be able to see him in your building, like, take advantage of that and just savor it. Like, it's really special. That has to be said about Sidney Crosby. The next storyline I want to get to is Cole Caufield and how well he's been playing under Martin St. Louis in Montreal. That seems like it's going really well.
Yeah, and I'm actually hard pressed to think of one coaching change that affected one player so dramatically and markedly than what we've seen with Cole Caufield and Martin St. Louis. I mean, look, there's a lot expected of Cole Caufield in his full rookie season last year. After he played, of course, in the playoffs for Montreal the year prior, and it didn't go very well for half a year. It was a disaster, frankly. And I'm not laying it all at his previous coach's feet, but it's hard to ignore the fact that when Martin St. Louis was hired in early February, to this moment right now, Cole Caufield is actually third in the entire NHL in 5-on-5 goals. And, he couldn't put a puck in the lake prior to Martin St. Louis being the coach of the Montreal Canadiens. And so I think this is a great story because obviously a player with, pretty big hype around him has always been a goal scorer, scored a ton before he got to the NHL. And, ever since Martin St. Louis has been behind the bench, he's been doing exactly that. And what's interesting about him is so many of those goals do come at even strength. For Caufield, all 5 that he scored in 7 games this season have been that way, and so many in the back half of last year. And so, you're talking about a young player, you're talking about an organization looking for signs of hope. I think the fact that you've got the Cole Caufield whisperer behind the Canadiens bench is a nice story that's developed in Montreal.
Or as some players of the Montreal Canadiens would refer to him as Cole Caufield's dad.
Exactly.
Do you see that video? TSN had all those different videos of each Canadian team. And I think they were just asking them just like little like questions about like which player is most likely to do this. And I think they like those types of videos. That's where we got like guys like Brendan Gallagher saying like Martin St. Louis is like Cole Caufield's dad or something like that. Like it's pretty, but Martin St. Louis, to his credit, like he's seen how special Cole Caufield was from even before he was head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. Like the dynamic between those two, like it's crazy.
Right. I mean, similar stature. I think they think the game in a similar way. And confidence is so much of success, probably in all areas of your life. But, for athletes, it's so big that, you ever talk to an athlete that's been through a long slump and comes out of it, they'll talk about how their confidence was lacking. They're questioning themselves. I'm sure Cole Caufield was in that situation last year. And so to have someone who believes in him, that's supporting him, that's maybe been able to give him specific pointers in his game, it's a good story because, I don't think we want to see anyone struggle, but especially a young player. And that had to be a pretty darn hard year last year. And you wonder, okay, so he has a great second half when it kind of doesn't matter with the new coach. How's that going to carry over? And the fact that he's had such a great start to this season, I think is nothing but a positive.
Let's move on to the third storyline here. Buffalo and Detroit appear to be advancing beyond their own rebuilds.
Yeah. And look, those are two great hockey cities, and I've been around long enough to have been in both cities when the teams were very competitive and, You go into the buildings, it used to be Joe Louis Arena, it's since become Little Caesars Arena, the new rink they opened in Detroit. The Buffalo rinks had 7,000 names. KeyBank Center, I think, is the most recent one. But anyway, nothing sucks the life out of a great hockey city like perpetual losing. And the life had been sucked out of those two places. And I think there's real signs now that, I'm not sure how far each team can climb this year. Like the playoffs to me still look like a lofty goal. Buffalo is probably a little bit ahead if we're sort of looking at those two teams specifically. But I think both teams are showing signs that they don't suck by any stretch. You know what I mean? Like it's not just going to be another year of the exact same thing. And so there should be interest growing back. And I think there'll be new life in those hockey cities. And I think that's so positive. We've talked about the Sabres a little bit, I know in previous podcasts, but just the run they had through Western Canada, Rasmus Dahlin's emergence, the fact they finished last year strong. I have some questions, big picture maybe, but the goaltending, but so far it's been good. Craig Anderson's been excellent. He's 41, and obviously Eric Comrie brought in to play net there. What I see in Detroit is a team that finally has some secondary scoring. It's not that they lack, Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi, pretty good offensive players, but there just was not a lot beyond them. I think a lot was being asked, but you signed David Perron, who's, just seems like he scores 30 plus every year. He's already got 4 goals. Dominic Kubalik's been a nice addition for them, has put up some points. Andrew Kopp centering their second line now. So I think Detroit is just rounding out the forward group and have some promising young players themselves. And so, those are two good stories. I think it's good for the NHL big picture to have those being thriving hockey markets. And it's probably a little soon to say they're back there yet because, I haven't seen what the attendance is like. Buffalo hasn't played many home games yet, but I have to believe that some excitement's coming back into those fan bases, and rightfully so, because the rebuild is exciting because you're hoping to get top prospects, but eventually you got to sell winning, and I think those teams are going to start selling winning here very soon.
Right. What about the goalies? You have them as their own storyline.
Well, I mean, look, there's so much variance in performance from year to year, and it's so early. So this some of these takes might age poorly, but I'm just looking to start the year, and you have Carter Hart with a tremendous save percentage early in the year. Linus Ullmark in Boston has had an awesome start. Ilya Samsonov with the Leafs was 4-1 out of the gates and has had a good run here. Even Anderson, who I mentioned, he's 2-0 in his starts for Buffalo. I think he stopped 66 shots or something like that. And those are all sort of bounce backs, or in the case of Anderson, just maybe a surprise performance that he's still being able to perform at that level, given his age. He's actually the oldest player in the league, full stop at this point. And, I think that those are nice stories. Someone like Carter Hart has had so many expectations. The last few seasons have been really difficult for him. I'm sure for anyone that's been on the Flyers, he hasn't maybe taken that step. Maybe we're starting to see that. Samsonov came to Toronto for, turned down longer term offers from other teams, signed a 1-year deal with the Leafs in hopes of kind of reviving his career. And I think you're seeing early signs that that's the case. Ullmark had signed a big 5-year free agent contract 2 summers ago, and last year didn't go great. It wasn't awful, but this is maybe more what the Bruins were hoping they were going to get. And Boston's had such a strong start to the year, and so I think that there's a few bounce back performers among that group. I could have included Frederik Andersen as well in Carolina, who after ending last season injured has started off with a bunch of wins for the Hurricanes in his start. So I think that there's been some nice goaltender storylines. It's not all, the other end of the spectrum, because there's a few goalies like Marc-Andre Fleury, for example, who've had difficult beginnings to this season.
So let's go from the goalies to a forward. Shane Pinto for the Ottawa Senators is off to a really great start.
Yeah, and I'm calling him another beacon of hope in Ottawa, right? I mean, we talked so much this summer about the free agent signings and the trade for Alex DeBrincat and some of the extensions the Senators signed with their players that I think were, rejuvenated that marketplace. Well, Shane Pinto was one of those young prospects and, missed most of last season after a shoulder surgery. And so was maybe a little under the radar when it came to talking about what might be for the Sens. And look, some of this is a nice shooting percentage that will be unsustainable, but he's got 5 goals through 6 games for the Senators. And I think that's particularly important in light of the news Wednesday, unfortunately, that Josh Norris could miss potentially the rest of the season, but certainly we're talking a multiple month injury of his own with a shoulder issue that he has. And so, someone like Pinto being there to give it, again, a sort of a secondary scoring option and still a very young player, I think it's another reason for hope in Ottawa. And look, they're wrapping up, I believe, on Thursday night, a 5-game homestand. They've won the first 4 games of the homestand. We've seen fans come back to the building. They had a sellout in their home opener. I just think that this team is finally worth the price of admission again. That they've created some own buzz in their marketplace. And, Pinto is just another, I think, player to be excited about if you're a Sens fan and you're looking for, how do they crawl out of the abyss? Well, this is how you do it. You have players that are, doing things they haven't in the past. In this case, just because he's a young guy entering the league. But I think there's reason to be excited about him, and maybe could become a dark horse Calder Trophy favorite if he can continue some sort of productive start. We're not expecting him to score every night, but what a nice start to his season, especially after missing so much time last year.
Let's move on to Chicago. Their first 6 games of the year, they have a 4-2-0 record. That's not the record I was expecting for Chicago, considering we all thought they'd be trying to lead the way in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes.
Yeah, we should have had a You Can Bet That segment about like how many games does Chicago have to play before they get to 4 wins? Because we might have said like 10 or 12 games, given what was expected of them. And the fact they got there in 6 shows you that at least for a small period here, they're defying expectations. I mean, look, they signed NHL players, like they signed Max Domi, presumably for the chance to flip him at some point. We'll see how that plays out. I don't think that the plan that management has in place has changed any. I do think that they intend to get worse before get better and sell off more parts, as they've done pretty aggressively over the last 12 months or so. But one of the things that stands out to me is if you saw that the clip with Luke Richardson, the new head coach of the team, and Kyle Davidson were available to the media a day or two before training camp. And Luke was outright. He's like, look, I want to make Kyle Davidson's job hard. We're going to try to win as much as we can. And so far he's been true to his word. And so, this is one, if I had to sort of put on my speculating guess glasses, I don't think it's going to continue. I don't see Chicago being a team that stays in a playoff picture or truly defies expectations. But the fact they've done so for 2 weeks is interesting. And it's sort of like, how long can they keep this going? Does management, how does this play out? It'd be fascinating if they keep winning, put it that way, because I don't think, other than the head coach and I'm sure the players that have to play the games, there were not many people around that organization closely, and those of us more broadly in the hockey world, that expect them to win too much this year.
Let's go over to Boston. I have to admit, I thought the injuries were going to kill them. They're doing really well without Bruce Cassidy. But you know who's also doing really well? Bruce Cassidy with the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, isn't this interesting? I mean, basically 2 of the hottest teams to start the year is the team that Bruce Cassidy left and the one he took over, the Bruins and the Golden Knights. And so, I mean, by far, when I look back, we've had so many coaching changes in the last year, but the one that shocked me the most, and still I can't fully wrap my head around, is the Bruins firing Bruce Cassidy. His teams had like a 670 point percentage or something like that in his time there, that they made the playoffs all 6 years he was there. But they decided it was time for a fresh voice in Jim Montgomery. And lo and behold, even with their injuries, even with that coaching change, the Bruins have started, like wildfire this season. And it looks like Brad Marchand could return as soon as Thursday, but certainly is very close to return, even if it doesn't come Thursday after his hip surgeries that he had over the summertime. And so that's a great story in and of itself, because, there's a little last dancey vibe to the Bruins, I think. David Krejci's had a great start in coming back after a year in playing in Czechia, his home country. Patrice Bergeron only is on a 1-year deal. I mean, I don't know how long this core is going to be there. You can only really count on it being this season. And so the fact that they're off to a good start, I think, is encouraging. And then, that Bruce Cassidy has turned things around in Vegas, after their first missed playoffs ever last year, a year where a lot went against them, with just crazy injury problems and what have you, the cap situation, but he's had a strong start there. And so, that doesn't maybe surprise me as much as the Bruins start, just because of the combination of injuries and the change behind the bench. To me, I thought Vegas, I viewed that kind of as a bit of a one-off. And so I thought it was a good situation for him to step into. But anyway, this is one of those breakups where on both sides, each is thriving. So, it's a good news story.
Yeah, that's good. Those types of breakups are allowed to happen. Nazem Kadri in Calgary. I'm a little bit more familiar with this one than some of the other storylines. Off to an amazing start in Calgary. Points in all 6 games that he's played so far with his new team.
few highlight reel goals, end-to-enders already for him. I think what's interesting here is, first of all, it's a short summer, right? He ends, he plays in the Stanley Cup final injured, but he shouldn't have played those games, or wouldn't have played those games if they were his regular season, given what he was dealing with. And then he's got the long wait in free agency, which must have been stressful. He's got all the Stanley Cup parties and planning his own day with the Cup. He goes to Europe for a trip with his family. I mean, it was not the ideal summer of preparation, and that's not a knock at Kadri. It's just, the circumstances in his life didn't set up well, maybe to have the best carryover. And, there's some burden probably, I would assume, to, signing the kind of deal he did. You want to do well, but maybe you didn't get as much training time as you wanted, or as much time on the ice. Well, scratch all those narratives or thoughts or possibilities with the way he started. And we're going to measure, and Julian, especially you on the ground covering this team closely, you're going to measure the decision to sign him to that kind of money at his age. I mean, he's entering an age 32 season. He turned 32 at the start of October when he gets that $49 million contract. It's going to take years before we know if that was a good decision, most likely. But the fact that the first few weeks have gone so well, I think that's a really positive story, because I've seen it lots of times where the new free agent signing, comes in with different expectations, making different money, and it doesn't work initially. Sometimes it's hard to come back from a bad start. There's extremes like David Clarkson in Toronto, who, signed a big contract and got a 10-game suspension in the preseason and just never got going. And then unfortunately came into injury trouble, so he couldn't work his way out of that. But, there's other circumstances where it's almost just like a bad start to in the new city, it can wear on a player. And so I think the fact that it's gone so well for Kadri is a huge bonus, a great bit of news for the Flames. And, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, this guy's defying the age curve himself. He's a little younger than Sidney Crosby. Certainly didn't ever have the peak anywhere near as high as Sidney Crosby, but coming off a hugely productive year in Colorado, it looks like he's poised to do so again in Calgary.
Looks like I saw this stat. I think Nazem Kadri has had a 6-game point streak for every team that he's played for. So in Toronto and in Colorado, obviously, but something about those 6-game point streaks for Nazem Kadri, and also playing on Saturday nights, scored some goals on some Saturdays to start off the year. Let's go to the next storyline here. We love Big Val on this side. The choo-choo train is still roaring in Colorado.
Yeah, and look, it's sort of a similar. That the reason I grouped them together with Kadri, it's sort of a similar story, right? The last time I saw Big Val, he was literally being wheeled out of Mullett Arena on like a baggage cart. He had a boot on his right foot because he finished the Stanley Cup final with a broken right foot.
Jeez.
So I'm willing to wager it was not the most ideal summer for him. It was nice for him. He signed a big 8-year contract extension with the Avs, and so he was able to stay there. But again, not an ideal summer of preparing for an NHL season. And here he is scoring a goal a game out of the gate for the Avalanche. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. I mean, they lost Kadri, Andre Burakovsky in free agency. They lost Gabriel Landeskog, their captain, for 3 months after a knee surgery here recently. And so they needed someone to pick up the slack offensively. I still think the Avalanche are a great team, but you're looking not to have what we would call in the media Stanley Cup hangover. But I think just objectively, it's possible there's a bit of a sag to the start of the next year after winning the highs of winning a Stanley Cup and then losing so many key pieces. And I think the choo-choo train has helped keep things on track there. The Avs, as we're recording this, are 4-2 out of the gate. And so they've been able to fend off any sort of, difficult period. There's no talks about crisis, in Denver these days. And, I think big picture, the team will be okay. But the fact that Nichushkin has started so well, I think bodes well for them.
Yeah, I think they're tied atop the lead in the Central Division. The Colorado Avalanche are. Good on them. And finally, the final storyline, the NHL's Department of Player Safety being extremely quiet.
Well, yeah. And this is how I look at this. Like, aren't we better off to be talking about the skill in the game? Aren't we better off to be throwing flowers at the players who do amazing things on the ice every night than the violent aspect of it? And this has been an evolution over time. And I say this while literally knocking the wood of my desk, because I recognize there's games tonight, there's games tomorrow night, there's games the next night. This could all change quickly. I mean, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a huge shift, but as we're recording, there's been one suspension in the regular season. Evgeny Kuznetsov missed one game. Probably should have missed more with the violent nature of his high stick. But that sort of debate aside, I think that it's good news for the league that we haven't had a series of crazy incidents, and we're talking about getting this hit out of the game or that hit out of the game. There's been a lot of years in the past where that's been the case, but I think there's still been able to have most of the focus on the skill and speed and scoring aspects and things that I think will put butts in the seats a little bit more than some of the past where hockey's been. And so the less we hear from George Peros and his staff, the better. And I say that respectfully. I think they have a tough job, but I don't think having the endless debates about long suspensions and this and that is ultimately what's best for the NHL.
Well, that's going to do it for the 10 fun storylines in the NHL, according to one Chris Johnston. You're right. Those storylines are actually really great.
But yeah, let's focus on.
They were. I'm not being sarcastic.
I know. I was like, and I'm sure I missed a ton, right? Like I was trying to find maybe some things that literally have escaped people's view because they've been focused. Like I could have got into Arbor Jacki or maybe Wyatt Johnston, some of the rookies around the league that are doing fun things, Matty Beniers, guys we've actually talked about on our pod a fair bit. But I was just looking to see the good because there's a lot of good out there too.
I just also want to throw out an honorable mention to Troy Terry, who seems like he's playing really well in Anaheim. I think he's leading the team in scoring to start. Like there definitely are some really great storylines that we could have put in here as well. But no, I think the 10 you have are really great. And look, things are going to change throughout the season, and we're definitely going to find space to talk about them on the CJ Show. Now, our next partner is a pretty cool product. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system, in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. I'm sure you'll agree that most of us are not huge fans of having to take a bunch of pills or vitamins in the morning, but with Athletic Greens, you can get rid of all of those extra vitamin bottles and finally make some room in your cabinet. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good. You'll actually enjoy getting your daily vitamins in. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. All of the things. It's also lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or you are gluten-free. It also contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season, just around the corner. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. No need for a million different pills and other supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do, go visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. It's CJ's last name, athleticgreens.com/Johnston, to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And with that, it's time for Stick Taps. I will start with Phil Kessel. We talked about him on a previous edition. He is now the new Iron Man, played over 990 consecutive NHL games. Like there are players who have not played that many in their careers. The fact that he's able to do that in consecutive games is incredible. Quick trivia question for you, unless you happen to have seen Steve Dangle's tweet from yesterday. He started the streak on November 3rd, 2009 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Only 3 players from that game are still playing in the National Hockey League, aside from Phil Kessel. Any guesses as to who those players are?
Well, I saw the tweet, and I actually remember that time really well because Steven Stamkos and Luke Schenn were part of the same draft. In 2008, the Leafs traded up to get Schenn at the 5th pick. Tampa took Stamkos first overall. And then the next year, Victor Hedman was selected by the Tampa Bay Lightning, 2009, if I'm not mistaken. So those are the three guys in that game. Kessel had 10 shots on goal and didn't score in his Leafs debut. I mean, I wrote actually a story about this week. Like, that was another lifetime ago, Kessel in Toronto. And it's again worth its own sort of soap opera. Like, he got mistreated so much, honestly, in my opinion, by a lot of my colleagues. I was a young reporter at the time. I was never hard on him particularly. I do remember he you know what he did? He infamously didn't enjoy his media avails, right? But so 2013, the Leafs make the playoffs. We know how that series ended, but they're playing Boston going into that series. And obviously at that point in time, what could be a bigger storyline than Kessel having to go back into Boston to play the Bruins? And the day before the Leafs were flying down, it may have been 2 days before the series, but anyway, the last media avail in Toronto before the Leafs flew down to Boston, Phil Kessel literally ducked out the back door. Like, even PR, like, it wasn't like PR aided and abetted him. Like he even ducked out on them. And to the point where the Leafs brought out Dave Nonis, who was the general manager, to address the fact that Phil Kessel didn't speak and that he would be speaking every day from that point forward in that series. Like, I have never seen anything like that before or since. But it was a crazy time. It was a different media world too. Like, I think everything was more centralized. I mean, had the LFR even started by then?
If we're talking about that, I mean, yeah, because the LFR has been going around for like, 15, 16 years?
Okay, but it was still even in its infancy. I'm just saying there wasn't as many. The people that had strong voices in media had way more power or more, like, they were just heard more because there was fewer options at that point in time. You couldn't self-publish in those days, right? There weren't really blogs, or maybe a little bit, but the point of the story is Kessel got a rough ride in Toronto. I think he got misblamed for like a lot of other organizational problems. And yeah, so it's amazing he's gone from that first game as a Leaf till today and still hasn't missed one in between with a couple different stops along the way.
Yeah. So Phil Kessel, worthy of a stick tap from myself. Siege, who are you giving a stick tap to?
Mine is going to Borja Salming, who's obviously in a fight that unfortunately, he probably can't win. ALS is a terrible disease. It's taken a lot of great people. It's affecting Chris Snow, the assistant general manager in Calgary, and him and his wife have been very open about sharing his journey. And Borja is having a tough time right now, but I just want to send some love from our little part of the hockey world to him. Saw a nice video of Nicholas Lidstrom actually greeting him this week, giving him a hug. One thing that started up in trying to turn something positive out of a difficult situation is there's a Borja Salming Foundation being launched in Sweden to raise funds to aid with research for ALS, more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And the Swedish Hockey League, the Hockey Allsvenskan, which is the second league there, and the top professional women's league, they basically do their schedule, Julian, in rounds, they're called. It's like a grouping of games. And round 21, which was the number Borja Salming wore in the NHL, it comes in November. The league is sort of honoring Borja during that time and raising funds for this foundation next month. That's just getting off the ground, and I'm sure the hockey world will support that. And I would hope the NHL and the Maple Leafs will get behind some of those efforts too. But while Borja's in this battle, I just want to give a moment to praise him and hope that some good can come out of him and his family struggles.
I hope so too, and that's very well said. And that's a good way to end our show on this great Thursday. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode. You can get your questions in for Ask CJ if you want to get them in now off Twitter or on Discord. And we'll be back on Monday with a new episode of the CJ Show for CJ. Oh, you want to say something?
Halloween Monday.
Will you be wearing a costume on Halloween Monday?
Tune in to find out.
For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and happy Halloween.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.